Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Discovery Channel, our first post 4th of July post. I gained 10 pounds at the barbecue yesterday discussion. Uh, as always, Rocky still in.
Tom, I thought crawfish isn't supposed to
Oh,
add
no,
weight.
no. Man, come on, you're from Baltimore. We're past crawfish season. Now we're into crab season, right?
Crabs.
Soft shell crab season, man.
Yes.
No, crawfish are, if you're eting
All
crawfish
fun.
now, you're eating Chinese
That's
crawfish.
true.
We agreed not to talk politics, so I won't even go
Right.
there. the crawfish are hibernating, getting ready for next season.
That is true. Okay.
Yeah. So, and you're still in Tel Aviv?
I am for another month before I head stateside for a bit. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's our great pleasure today to have with us Rachel C. Rachel, for those of you who know her, I presume most of you do, unless you've not been paying attention to e-discovery for the last 10 years. Just wrapped up a 12-year stint in government service, which she'll talk about, a couple of different agencies. I think best known most recently for the EEOC. My particular love, if I can misuse the word, of Rachel in her career, it garners around the fact that she's worked in the employment part of the business in the agency for a while, and has been talking about AI before it was a marketing buzzword for every software company in the civilized world.
Things away. We'll get to that. Come on, Tom.
Yeah, no, but I want to give her kudos because, usually I cut people off when they say AI. I hit the mute.
Right, we're out.
But now we got somebody who can really talk about it. Rachel will talk about that. She's also been a leader in the trans rights movement and just finished her 5th year as the board president of the National Center.
Yeah, that was in 2022. So I rotated off.
Close enough. 20.
Yeah.
It's only July.
Whatever.
Yeah, right.
At Tom's
what
age,
is time?
Yeah, exactly.
And more importantly, as we talked about before Rocky came on, so we didn't offend him about talking about the world's greatest rock and roll band. Rachel is an accomplished French horn classical musician, and it's certainly, from your description of what you did this weekend in a professional recording session, is well beyond being just a hobby. It's an avocation. So I'm interested about that. So that, all of that being said, enough of me talking about you.
Well, that's it. We're done. We're done.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you, Rachel, for being here.
Yeah. Any questions from the audience? Tell us a little bit. We always like to start off tell us where you grew up and went to school, and then how that segued into the law and technology. So if you can give us a little background on that.
Well, let me just seize the agenda away from you, and let's start at the end.
What agenda?
So Tom, when you reached out to me to be on your podcast here, I think the first thing I said to you was, Tom, I'm no longer an e-discovery person. I don't know that I don't want to talk e-discovery because I really haven't been doing e-discovery for several years. And then we had, this back and forth about my career and AI. And it's like, no, it's okay. Come on in and talk on the podcast. So, I've been in the e-discovery space. I was in the e-discovery space for 15, 20 years, and did the pivot onto federal agency management, and almost became an IT executive in the government, and did some IT executive work a few years ago, then worked in AI policy for a bit, and now I'm back in the private sector, building a practice on AI counseling and AI risk management, ethical AI, all of the buzzwords, and very assiduously not doing e-discovery, being very grateful for my friends and colleagues at the firm, at Seyfarth, on the e-discovery side of things, and also saying, yeah, they're doing the
Go to them.
e-discovery thing.
Go to them.
I'm doing the AI thing with the people analytics folks and the folks at in the
Well, that's
innovation
okay,
side
because
of
all
the
the
firm.
software companies are doing the same thing. You know,
Well,
the
I
e-discovery
think
company, they don't talk about e-discovery anymore. It's all, we're AI. We're all about AI.
yeah, you could sell a lot of things slapping a web interface over the ChatGPT API and upselling it, and we shouldn't talk about that. Or maybe we should.
Although, I mean, it is a curious thing, because I think that, again, AI, and we're not just talking the law, we're talking across all industries, has all of a sudden inundated every single industry. And if you're like, if you're talking to a VC and you don't have something AI involved,
Yeah.
then they don't want to talk to you. So I think that it is important to understand a little bit about where true AI, because the truth is that most industries, legal included, when we talk about AI, aren't really talking about AI. They're talking about other technologies
Chatbots.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it is important to understand where AI is going to fit in truly in legal. And obviously, we want to hear a little bit in terms of your thoughts on e-discovery and AI, just in terms of how they'll intersect, and how it's going to impact litigation specifically, but other types of law as well. But I'm going to pull the agenda back and pop it back to Tom's question, because I think your background is going to definitely be helpful to help people understand where you're coming from, how you got to this position of understanding what AI is and defining policy. So
absolutely. So yeah, and thanks, Rocky. I appreciate pulling back. It's like, no, I don't want to read my bio. I was like,
no, let's not do bio. Let's not do bio.
The beginning.
So, no.
Yeah. No. So
how'd you get into this crazy business? Is the short
and why? Why would you ever want to?
Right. So I went to law school for like absolutely the wrong reasons. That I was choosing between music school and law school. That I graduated college, able Yale, that place in New Haven.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
And I had done a bunch of music performance studies, at the Yale School of Music as an undergrad, and was thinking about going straight, getting a master's in music performance. And it's like I was in a hurry. I was, I wasn't going to be a professional musician. I had made that decision, and so I was being really cynical. It's like, well, what can I do that I won't be waiting tables, and will scratch some of these other itches that I had on technology. So like in college, I worked tech support. I worked frontline tech support in college, doing a lot of
at the school or
at the school, and I staffed the computer cluster closest to Yale Law School. So like I interacted with a ton of Yale law students, frantic on they've lost their term paper. So that was my introduction to digital
you
forensics.
Decided to go to law school despite that exposure.
But think about it. I was being yelled at by Yale law students who had lost their paper trying to, do the forensics on recovery, under the paper's due tomorrow and I'm gonna fail. So, learning how to deal with problematic lawyer archetype personalities on a technical skill, that was something I had learned early.
You got early. And were you always interested in technology? Like growing up, were you like a tinkerer? You always were in there,
Oh, absolutely. I ran my introduction to the internet was running a dial-up BBS out of a second line in my parents' home.
Wow. Cool.
You know, the old FidoNet packet switching. You know, I was a beta tester for some BBS software, and you know, that was also my introduction to cybersecurity and ways that people would crash my BBS, and in
Cool.
ways that, you know, I would use Gopher to get to FTP in the ancient
Early days,
history
yes,
of the internet. So, you know, that my nerd cred, you know, goes way, you know, way back. You know, and that, you know, that includes Linux and Unix and, you know, all of that stuff from my college days.
Cool. So
So
you
yeah,
decide to apply
Yeah.
to law school and went to
I went to Duke,
Duke. Okay.
also for really the wrong reasons.
Who knows?
You know, I went to law school because you know, it was an acceptable career for my parents, for my, you know, Asian tiger parents. And you know, my family had some interactions with the legal system that left, I think, my parents with a bad taste in their mouth. So you know, certainly lawyers were perceived as having a lot of power and having a lot of prestige. So it was an acceptable career. It wasn't something that I chose for like the love of the law, and it wasn't, you know, it was a default. It was a default, and it's like, hey, there's lawyers who do technology, and that sounds interesting, and that sounds a little bit different than being a web developer, or you know, in the 90s, you know,
Yeah.
or you know, I had friends going to work for Microsoft. I had friends going into, you know, sort of jumping in on the first dot-com boom, you know, of the late 90s, and I thought, no, I want something more traditional, and maybe that was a mistake. I you know, I try not to have too many regrets about that time, you know, in my life, and you know, I do regret not getting the master's in music performance, because you know, I could have like deferred law school for a year. But you know, it's I did law school and then went to a law firm in Columbus, Ohio, where yeah, close to where I grew up, close but not too close. Uh, and thought I'd do IP litigation. um, you know, had my first big case involving hydraulic pipe routing in a steel mill, which technically is technology. I
Yeah, I
got,
was
it's like,
gonna
you
say
know,
it's like
Yes.
bordering.
it
Yeah,
was
Yeah.
engineering. I was dealing with engineers, and you know, there, if we were in my firm office, I had like an exhibit from that arbitration. You know, the chunk of structural
yeah.
steel with proper and improper bolt torquing. It's a great souvenir. But you know, that wasn't exactly the work, you know, that I wanted to do. Um, and you know, that
It didn't
firm,
truly call to you, right?
you know, hydraulic pipe routing, you know,
Yeah.
eh, eh,
Just
you know,
rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yes.
I did product liability work. So if you know, one of the big carpet installers, retail carpet shops in Columbus, Ohio, if you had a carpet install go wrong, I was the junior associate who handled that litigation.
But,
So
yeah.
there's more information, you know, stored up here about, you know, carpet and laminate and hardwood installs gone wrong than I care to admit. And it's like, oh yeah, that look at, you know, well, you know, the edging ain't, you know, isn't right. Like the quarter round's not even. It's like,
Yeah.
not did not want to build a career on that. And you know, they staffed me on Enron. They staffed me on, you know, these early e-discovery cases as a frontline reviewer, and I started asking questions, asking slightly impertinent questions for, you know, a third or fourth year associate to be asking. And you know, yeah, in on e-discovery in 2003. And so started talking on e-discovery, saying, hey, this is a thing. This is a thing. There's this Zubile case you should read. You know, being the junior mid-level associate, speaking up on the big, you know, MDL conference calls, going, it's like, well, wait a second. What about the shared drives? Wait a second. Do we really need forensics? We don't need forensics on this case. It's like, what about the backup tapes? Let's talk backup tapes. And so, you know, that those conversations in, you know, 2004,
Everything ended up,
2005.
yeah, get them steered towards you because
Yeah.
if you're gonna raise the issue is yours because we don't know how to deal with it. So you
Right.
must.
Right. And we had, you know, at my first firm, we had, you know, after Enron, we had, you know, some big e-discovery cases that I led. And then FTC second requests. You know, I think, you know, part of the law firm life, you know, I had two very young children and a family vacation to Disney World that I bowed out of to run an FTC second request.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
that was not, that was, I'm in a different place now. But as you know, as a fifth year associate, you know, I didn't feel able to say no to that, and that was you know, something I absolutely think about, and you know, we talk about, you know, joking about me going back from government to, you know, to big law about what work-life balance and the culture of the billable hour, you know, looks like. So if I'm giving you the full bio, you know, in 2006, again, ancient history, I was the e-discovery group at Seyfarth Shaw. I was their first associate hire. So I joined Seyfarth in 2006, moved my family to Chicago to do all e-discovery all the time. Did that for 2 years. You know, had a blast working on some big cases at Seyfarth, making some good friends, having some great relations, and, you know, with counsel and all of those connections, and really becoming an employment lawyer then. Then I moved a family again to Richmond, Virginia, where I'm talking to you. I'm in my house in Richmond now. Made partner at Williams Mullen here in Richmond. Lasted 2 years. You parted ways with the firm over, you know, all of the reasons that are, it's like, oh, you know, that's the past.
Right. Keep moving forward, and at that point you joined the government, or that was still.
Yeah. So I was at Williams Mullen running the e-discovery group there from 2008 to 2010. And then I went into the federal government, federal service, starting at the National Labor Relations Board, building their e-discovery program in 2011. So from 2011 to 2016, I was at the board, and then from 2017 onwards, I was at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Assistant General Counsel for Technology. Did that up until 2019, when then I did the career pivot in 2019. And I'm sure there's like lots to dig in on all of that.
Well, okay, so
well, that kind of begs the question. Sorry, Rocky. I'm not really sorry. I interrupted.
I know you're not, but that's okay.
I'm just being polite. So when did AI, you know, real AI, pop up on your radar? Was it at not till you got to the EEOC, or were you seeing it before that?
Okay, so like, I think we're among friends here, you know. So
Yeah,
when you say, you know, real AI, if we're among friends, you know, concept clustering and predictive coding and TAR, I don't know that we'd call that real AI, but it's machine learning.
It's machine learning, absolutely.
It's machine learning, you know. And so, you know, what I say to the AI people that I work with is like, guys, I've been using concept clustering since 2004.
yeah.
And, you know,
See, I agree with you totally on that.
was
Rocky
pretty good.
disagrees.
there were ways that you could use concept clustering in 2004. The interface was horrible. The workflows were bad, but it would cluster, and you could, if you knew what you were doing, you could get some efficiencies out of it. You talk about sentiment analysis and all of this other, sure, there were vendors with that 2005, 2006. So,
I mean, they generally
I can talk to that stuff, and, I can talk about, hey, training lawyers on the use of AI, predict, let's roll up our sleeves and do TAR. Let's roll up our sleeves and do predictive coding. So I've been, I was doing that from the ancient history days. And it's like, let's train the first level reviewers on a 10x and see what happens. Some people like the Petri dish, others don't. It's like, have you played video games? That was a conversation that I was having there. But the ethical AI stuff, it's like, wait a second, people are using machine learning on people. People are using AI and neural nets and all of this technology to make decisions about employment or resumes or promotions or, value. That was...
Does that truly impact and matter?
Well, I hope people would agree that it matters. I think there's a lot of people who, in 2019, 2018, were surprised at how mature or how much penetration that technology had. So, it was really my conversations in 2019 with commissioners and EEOC commissioners and enforcement staff, and others in the employment field that started me, on that journey. So, if you think about the world in 2019 and the world in where lawyers were or weren't talking about AI, I spoke with Jenny Yang and Kai Feldblum, Jenny Yang, former chair of the EEOC, Kai Feldblum, former, commissioner, really active on LGBT and disability rights, talking to them about, hey, there's this technology that's working on people. And maybe the commission has something to say about it. Maybe these conversations that the e-discovery folks are having about ethics and technology and attorney competence to deal with technical issues, maybe that has something to contribute to lawyers looking at AI working on people. So
right.
That's when I'd say that I really started talking about real AI, however we decide to define real AI.
Well, we can define it any way we want because everybody else does. So,
but the pre-2022 concepts around the AI, because I think 2022, early 2023, we've seen a drastic shift over the last year, really, in terms of how people and both think about and understand what AI is and what it's capable of. But before we keep going down there,
I'm sorry, real quick question. I'm sorry, once again, Rob.
Like it's a host fight. I'm just going to get out of the host fight here.
This is how we work. So yeah.
Okay. That people issue that you talk about, do you think that was a case of first impression? I mean, were you the first folks at the EEOC to start looking at that issue, that problem?
No, I think that within the industry, within data scientists, IO psychologists, vendors, application developers, and the employers who had it on their radar, the question is, okay, broadly speaking, there's technology that can help you be better at hiring, that can either give you both process efficiencies and, at its best, help you identify candidates you might miss, help you meet your diversity, equity, and inclusion goals, saying, it's like, hey, if we can be better than the human hiring processes on our DEI considerations, why wouldn't we use technology for this? If the assessment that we're using can be more fair and less biased, and those are terms of art, right?
Yep.
Than a human process, why wouldn't we use it? So there's a business case for not just doing it, but doing it right. And there's the negative, there's the, oh, by the way, if we do it wrong, we'll be violating the law, and someone might come after us. And someone might come after us, maybe not as much on the radar in 2019, but certainly being discussed in among data science and IO psychology, and not exactly on the radar of the bar and regulators like it is today, but being discussed. It's like, hey, this is a problem. If you think about some of the studies out there, the MIT Gender Shades project, that talked about accuracy on facial recognition, and how the leading facial recognition libraries at that time had really not great precision, not great recognition on Black people, especially Black women. And why was that? It's like, well, it was mostly trained on white people. And so, of course, its accuracy, its precision is lower when you present it with a face that's not typical of its training data.
Right.
So that was 2019, and people thinking, or around that period, and people thinking through the implications of, hey, this is a common library that almost everyone, or so many people, are using. What does it mean that it's more accurate for white people and less accurate for people with darker complexions? And that was kicking around. That was absolutely kicking around.
Right.
Rocky, I'm sorry, I did interrupt you.
I think my other pitch, my other pitch on the, as a former regulator, is, we have messages from commissioners and messages from the regulators saying, guys, the technology is new, but the laws from our civil rights laws from the 60s and beyond, they still apply. That Title VII says, if you discriminate on the basis of sex, race, national origin, religion, if you discriminate on the basis of these protected characteristics, it violates the Civil Rights Act. And so whether you use AI or any other selection tool or a human process, the result is what the law is looking at. And we have the commission has regulations from 1978, the Uniform Guidelines, that do apply. And the commission, in its latest technical assistance, said, hey, by the way, those 78 guidelines apply if you use AI. So, how much we're talking about that now, we're talking about it a lot, but in the dark ages of 2019, there were people saying, oh, hey, we applied the Uniform Guidelines, and here's our ratios. And some people are going, well, wait a second, that's not a bright line test, that's a rule of thumb. What does that mean? How do we apply the 78 guidelines to these principles? That's been an IO psychology and data science discussion among folks for a while. And just because you don't see lawyers engaged publicly in that discussion doesn't mean that it wasn't happening.
It's not happening. So how much, in your thoughts, your opinions, having been in the government, been a regulator, basically, I mean, being amongst the people who are looking at these issues in depth, how much do you think the law and the guidelines right now are fully appropriate for where we are today in 2023 versus how much modification? And I'm not saying specifically like this specific guideline, or just overall, how up to date would you classify the overall approach that the government follows today, and how much do they need to learn? Because like we've had conversations in the past with some other guests where the discussions were around, especially, a regulatory action took place from the European Commission where they came out saying XYZ, and it seemed like they just have no true sense of what's really happening on the ground with the technology, that they're always playing catch up. So how much of it is actually they're playing catch up and they don't have a sense versus how much of it is they really do understand, but they're working on the guidelines and trying to bring them forward?
Well,
Yeah, I
let
know it's a
me
loaded question. It's a big
Yeah.
let me let
and
me
I'm not asking any specific administration or anything like that. I'm asking
no, well,
overall.
you kind of are. You kind of are.
Yeah.
So
No,
let
no,
me, Rocky. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
really,
yeah.
I'm really not, because I'm specifically asking in regards to, is education amongst the regulators and amongst the people who are tasked with governing these types of issues, is it enough? Or do we need either more education or better people coming in and encouraging them to get involved in these areas? That's my real question. I know, deep.
Okay. So first things first. I am extremely impressed and refer clients and anyone else who will listen to me to the work of NIST and the NIST risk management framework that came out in final form, or was published in whatever, the NIST RMF at the start of this year, version 1.0 came out. I tell techies or even non-techies, also look at the playbook and the NIST special publication that talks about mitigating bias. Those publications are extremely good. They're very technical. They provide a way of thinking about risk, and risk includes the risk that the algorithm isn't doing what you think it does, and that includes bias and fairness. And so that's something that came out of the federal government that I personally feel is extremely worthwhile. There are a bunch of agencies, including the White House, that have come out with AI documents, AI frameworks, AI principles. This is an extremely complicated, crowded space. It's not just the federal government. There's legislative proposals, there's state and local proposals. So like today, as we're recording this podcast, this video, it's the day that enforcement is active in New York City. So like New York City, local law 144 goes in, and the enforcement deadline is today. And so a lot of employers are really have been wrestling with how to comply with a New York City law governing requiring bias audits on automated employment decision tools. However, we define that very specifically defined. That's New York City, with other state proposals. And then international, the EU AI Act, you have things in the UK, you have Singapore, you have China, you have all of these overlapping regulatory efforts. It's a complicated space.
Yeah.
Now, sorting out who's getting there first, whether it's Senator Schumer, whether it's the White House, and what we're going to be able to hang
we said
our
we weren't going
hats
to talk
on.
about politics. So let's not talk about Congress doing anything.
Well, but
Anything.
that's part of how the sausage here gets
Yeah.
made. That
Right.
I don't think any people who would want, any of my clients would want to take advice. It's like, why don't you just wait a couple of years while Congress and then the FTC or whoever Congress empowers passes regulations that gives you the certainty on this, on what you need here. We're not going to wait. That industry and other folks aren't going to wait. And I think the other thing that Congress is hearing is they're hearing about the FOMO that we have all of this FOMO in industry, not just from the venture capitalists, but geopolitical FOMO that we're in an AI arms race with China, that we're in an AI arms race and we're falling behind, however we define falling behind. Please, Congress, please, White House, don't impose regulation on Silicon Valley that makes us less competitive, that makes American businesses less competitive, or makes it harder for us to hire people and to compete in the global economy. And so there's that pull from civil rights saying, wait a second, does the technology have problems? And the countervailing force is going, we want to use AI to be more efficient, to be better, and to compete. And so that how that shakes out into actionable regulation, there's a lot of uncertainty there. So Rocky, to give as direct an answer to one of your questions, as possible, we have all of these regulations. We have in the US, I think we have principles. We have principles, rights-based principles that say, hey, we shouldn't discriminate on the basis of race, sex, national origin. People with disabilities should have reasonable accommodations, and you need to have a process for reasonable accommodations. All of these protected characteristics, and we have the principles on finance, on medical devices, on all of these other places that people are using AI. There's regulators and there's existing rights-based principles that talk about, hey, give an explanation when you're denied credit. Don't discriminate on the basis on all of these protected classes for housing, for extending credit. And when we're making medical decisions, when we're having healthcare decision making, let's the devices need to be safe and effective. And how do we do that? We have existing processes that fit in there, and applying that to AI, applying that to machine learning, that's part of our challenge. And I think that's happening before the regulators are giving folks with the certainty that they want.
Okay. Do we have enough people? Do we have enough smart people? And I don't mean to imply that some
no,
people
you know
are,
the answer. You know the answer. You know the answer I'm going to give you, that it's an uneven fight. It is hard to get technical people into the government and civil society. I'm now in the private sector. I'm now back at a large law firm, and the club of people in the government who really get tech and who are willing to engage in the sausage making, it's a small club. Civil society on the nonprofit side, is the same way, and it's also the challenge of policy making versus enforcement and litigation. And like, hey, let's let the lawsuits fly and let the courts sort it out. I'm not sure that's the best way to create policy on anything. So
I would move it beyond not sure.
Yeah. But
there's
it is what
Tom,
we have.
there's also a need for people with these skills in industry, that if you've re-skilled yourself or cast yourself as an AI attorney, it's like, I'm now a prompt engineer. What does that even mean? It is like, lawyer, prompt engineer. Sure, let's do it. There's people being hired and snatched up on industry, not just because of the VC money flying around on anything AI, but because I think people do recognize that this is hugely disruptive, and looking for people who are smart, and it's hard for the government to compete against that.
So is it an educational system issue?
It's a pipeline issue.
Yeah.
Absolutely, a pipeline issue.
And that always begs the question of how come we have less females in the technical skills arena. Going back to, I saw a amazing interview with the ex Mrs. Gates recently, where she was talking about, look, it starts in junior high, it starts in high school.
Earlier, yeah.
Young women are told that it's not cool to take math classes. Not cool to, as you said, you had the experience of, having a BBS and getting that sort of skill. But many, if not most, young women are not in that, at least not yet.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah,
Well,
it's a pipeline issue. That's a great analysis.
Yeah. Let's talk, because we're going to start running out of time very soon. You're back.
Rocky, I tell you, and I tell you.
We're still on question 1, right?
Yeah, we
exactly. As my old friend Russell Brand says, we don't run out of time. We can never run out of time.
Yes. You're back in practice now. And you're back at the firm where you were 18 years ago, whatever it was.
Roughly, 2006. Yeah.
Yep. What do you see? So coming back to it, what do you see in terms of approach from the firm that's changed, that's more encouraging, that is, you're a different person now than you were 15, 18 years ago. What's changed? Yeah. Exactly. Hey, we said we were going to go through that discussion. So yeah.
Sure. Well, I think one of the reasons that I'm really excited to be rejoining Seyfarth is that it's a place where I think where I feel that they've really committed to diversity and inclusion, and understanding who firm leadership is and what their vision for both innovation and technology, and I'm not going to do the firm marketing thing, but Seyfarth, Seyfarth has a history of innovation in the legal space, and that's exciting to me. I think there are employers out there who are in need, who are really looking for help navigating through AI issues, and having, hey, we have this tool that we need to comply, not just want to comply with regulatory requirements and mitigate and manage the risk of lawsuits and enforcement, but also are looking for guidance on how do we do the right thing? How are we managing risk? How are we deploying the technology in an ethical way? Are we asking the right questions when do we have the right structures set up to figure out not just develop model development, but model risk management, and are we taking advantage of all of these other processes that may exist elsewhere? And hey, I'll bring it back to e-discovery, that when you have a vendor product that the vendor says it works, and you have people poking at it saying, well, prove it to me.
Right.
How are we going to test this on my data? I know you've run it. You've run the Enron data.
The Enron
data
database.
Great. What about my data?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, what happens if what happens when I start crunching some of this myself and running it through myself and running my own queries? What happens when I go past your demo? What happens when you
actually use it?
Yeah. And so those skills, and managing nerds and managing coders, and getting your arms getting dirty in the data, I think those skills are skills that I developed at the start of my career and have been encouraging people to develop, and I think they're very applicable to where we are in AI today.
Yep. Okay, so we are going to move into the wrap-up phase of the call. I've got a couple questions for you. Really quick, top of your head, to just let people understand a little bit more about you.
Okay.
Let's start with, what's your favorite book?
gosh.
No.
I used to say A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving.
Okay.
And that was my favorite book from a while ago. I haven't really given that a lot of thought to whether it's still is my favorite book.
Okay. Favorite Disney?
You know, I think the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin
Yes.
is certainly the book as a parent and thinking about motherhood and my relationship with my children. That's the book that's made the biggest emotional impact on me lately. I don't know
Yeah,
that it's my favorite yet.
but it is a darn good book series. So yeah. Favorite Disney hero or heroine?
Or
Or villain. Or villain.
well, yeah. I mean, Ursula from The Little Mermaid is just such a campy villain. Gosh, who's the Disney prince? Well, Princess Leia is officially a Disney
That's true
princess.
now.
Yeah.
So
Right,
Who is-
I gotta go with Princess Leia as my favorite Disney princess.
I would have to argue with you.
Okay.
Generally.
Okay.
If you're talking about what you're teaching your kids, it's not Princess Leia, it's General Leia.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes.
There we go.
If you could have an unlimited supply of any single thing, what would it be?
Time.
Back to time. Okay. So you're into Kang and the Loki thing? In Disney,
I mean, I was, of course, I was disappointed with Quantum Mania. That movie seemed
yes.
just not to hit. You know, like I started watching. Well, let's just plant this recording right in time here. I watched Secret Invasion. You know, a few episodes of that yesterday. It seemed pretty good. It seemed okay, but
I watched the first two so far. Yeah.
Totally disappointed. I didn't grab me.
Not feeling it, Tom?
No,
Okay.
I was disappointed. But
Well,
you know,
to give up to relieve your disappointment, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask two questions to wrap this up that I think will make you a little bit happier. That's just my gut.
No, the answer to this question never makes me happy. We usually ask a question about musical preferences involving the greatest rock and roll band in the world, the Rolling Stones, and some little other upstart band from Liverpool. But I'm going to ask you, given your musical background, Bach or Beethoven?
Beethoven. That, you know, Bach is, well, I think I have too many scars from, you know, musical theory and figured bass, and, you know, writing, you know, chorales in the style of Bach. There's, you know, I play the Bach, you know, unaccompanied cello suites, a lot of them on the French horn for myself. And so just for like as a meditative exercise, you know, playing like the prelude to like the first or the second suite, you know, really on the French horn really helps me find myself centered and, you know, just getting sort of into a flow state. And that's my absolute favorite Bach. But that's a very personal, hey, this is something I'm playing. Beethoven, just, you know, the symphonies and other things, you know, within, you know, his repertoire, you know, absolutely. That's just so much. I have so much more experience with that and so much more vocabulary and memories and a whole bunch of other things with the Beethoven symphonies and other works.
Great.
But it's the late romantic, you know, orchestral rep that all cite as favorites more than Beethoven. But that's
however, I think we do have to go back to the original question though, Tom, just to get Rachel's.
All right, just to get it on the record, Stones or Beatles?
Beatles.
That's why I wanted it.
Okay, sure.
Not that anybody's keeping score here.
No, except for that over 2.5 years, I believe the Stones have been mentioned, what, four
Four.
times?
Or
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Or, well,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
and,
what does that tell you?
I had nothing. I have nothing further. No,
Yeah.
I got nothing. So last question. And you're probably saying, thank God, enough of these two bozos. If you could spend a day with anybody from our profession, and we define that extremely loosely, anybody from our profession, living or dead, a day with them, who would that person be and what would you do?
Oh gosh, you warned me about this question like half an hour ago, and like the multitasking has not kicked in. The or dead portion is probably some. We're gonna hang up here. I'm probably gonna come up with something, absolutely brilliant. Is it, yeah, probably. Is it egotistical to say I could be brilliant with enough time? I don't know.
Yeah.
And if they're dead, they don't necessarily have to come back as a zombie. You're allowed to like
No. They would revive.
Right.
They would reanimate.
If it's not too gauche to choose a living person, I'd love
No.
to spend I'd love to spend some more time with Vivian Ming. I met I've met Vivian a few times. We've talked about
And tell everybody who
AI.
she is.
So Vivian is an entrepreneur and someone who has been in on AI as a coder, as a philanthropist, extremely smart. I've been so pretentious. So I met her when after we were both profiled in an article in the Atlantic together.
Okay.
It's like, hey, the reporters talk, and the reporter was talking to trans women, in leadership roles, who were experiencing life, pre-transition, post-transition, comparing how is life different, and so we had a lot to talk about in that context, and a lot to talk about in some of our subsequent interactions, not just on AI, but also politics and strategy, and the future of the LGBT rights movement. Just a really neat person, a really interesting person, unquestionably in tech. And I'm probably thinking way too much in tech and way too rooted in our discussion on AI that we've been having for the past 45 minutes or so.
It's really interesting, just in terms of tech, how little tech there was when, we were in law school, when we were starting in this business. It's certainly in my
What's
case.
this we thing, Tom?
Yeah, all right. Back in the 19th century, when I started, and Herman Melville was the greatest author in the country.
It's I think it's interesting that when I was in law school in the 90s, the technology that I was focused on was, the nascent internet. And, okay, so we all know, section, 230, but like, all those, the Scientology cases and like, DMCA copyright, takedowns and, all of and encryption, all of those fights, that we were having, in the 90s, some of them are the foundation for things that we talk about today, and others it's like, that's ancient. Encryption as a munition. Oh, that's so quaint. But there's skills there, and so if there's anyone, in the e-discovery crowd, still with us, there's skills on technology, on, hey, how does this stuff actually work, and how do you apply the law or principles of what's right and wrong, and what do people understand, what does the judge actually understand about the way any of this stuff works? Probably nothing. What do we do about it? How do we explain this very technical concept to folks who don't get it?
And that's the key in my world, in the litigation world. How do you get everybody I understand. Yeah.
Those skills, those are the same skills. And hey, my callback is, you got an angry lawyer from Yale screaming at you about technology
Why
they
isn't it
don't
working?
understand.
Right.
Why can't I get my paper back? It's like, ma'am, because the disk is mangled. I can't
Right.
even put it in here. It's gone. It's
gone.
gone beyond my ability. Yelling at me
Inalterably gone.
won't help you. That's those are skills that
Yeah.
we develop.
Yep.
Look at that.
Well,
E-discovery
Rachel,
called callback, Tom.
Awesome.
there you
Awesome.
go.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Rachel, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us. It's a great pleasure to talk about these things in detail. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see you in person someplace down the road, ILTA or Legal Tech, or one of those other boring shows we attend. And best of luck now that you're
Yeah.
back with the firm. It sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Congrats.
Thanks. Appreciate
Good
it.
luck to you and Rocky, my friend, as always. Good talking to you, and hope to see you in person as well next month when you get back over here. And
yeah, hopefully soon.
thanks to all of our friends out there listening in. We'll see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.